And let's go bring to order our meeting of Templeton Community Services District Board of Directors. This is our regular meeting today, June 3rd at 7 p.m. Roll call, please.
Director Spardonish.
Here.
Logan.
Here.
Martinson.
Here.
Peterson.
Here.
And Tyrell. Here.
Please stand for pledge of allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please have a seat. Report out of closed session. We had a closed session during after our meeting, May 20th, 2025, and there was nothing to report from that closed session. Order of business. Any board members would like to change the order of business? Good. Okay. Special reports, we like to recognize,
Get up, buddy, get up.
I'd like to recognize Justin Black for graduating from the Leadership North County.
Yeah, I just wanna, we wanna take a minute just to talk about this program. Justin's our most recent participant in the program, but the district's had a long-standing support for this program and programs that are like it. As a matter of fact, decades ago, we had an employee go through the San Luis Obispo Leadership Program when it was based on the San Luis Obispo Chamber of Commerce. And then this North County program was started up initially by the Atascadero Chamber of Commerce. And at the time, pre-COVID, it's like BC, right? Before COVID. Pre-COVID, we had multiple participants, our district engineer Tina Meyer. It was a shared participation with our fire chief, Bill White, who was also at the time, who was also a city of Atascadero employee, and Mel Johnson. And I believe Mel was in class number 2. And so again, pre-COVID, then the program kind of went on a hiatus for several years during COVID and a few years following. And then the Paso Robles and Templeton Chamber of Commerce kind of took over what was the Atascadero-led effort. I think that started back up last year. And Justin Black participated in class number 6. It's a year-long program that the district supported. There's a cost to participate in the program. And Justin devoted a day a month for about a year and a couple of days in a workshop. And that format for this program is very similar to what it was when Mel participated. It's very similar. I did a program very similar to this way back in 1999 in a different location, but these are held as a leadership training opportunity and a lot of great networking. And Justin shared some stories with us, and he was named class sweetheart.
Oh. So
I don't know if that's good or bad.
Audience.
That's
Justin is our utility manager and a little bit about your background and how long you've been
He's
with.
standing, so I think now's the
I
time.
know, but I want to give him the appropriate recognition and also for the benefit of the people in the audience who don't know Justin, because all of us around the table do know Justin.
Yeah, sure. So coming up on 26 years of civil service. That's with agencies from Ventura, city of Ventura to city of Sunnyvale. Just in San Luis Obispo County alone, I've worked for city of Paso, city of San Luis Obispo, city of Atascadero. And now I'm lucky and fortunate to be working with Templeton CSD, utilities manager. So overseeing operations and management of the water system, wastewater systems, and really anything that I can help out with, parks in any way that I can help out. Happy to do so. So really appreciative. Thank you so much for the support with this program. Past representatives, employees, TCSD, myself and future. I wasn't sure if I was gonna have the benefit of participating in a program like this in my career. And so with Jeff's general manager's nudge and your support, I was able to participate and I had the most amazing time, you know, with the experience, and I would advocate anyone who's interested in growing as a leader and their network and relationships. To Gina Fitzpatrick is the CEO for the Paso Doubleton Chamber now, and it's excellent. The program is top notch, and so wholeheartedly recommend participating with this program. I want to thank you again to the board.
Thank you. We're lucky to have you.
Anyways, we do not have a plaque for Justin because he walked away at the ceremony with like two handfuls. He got recognition from our assemblymen and congressmen and.
And I saw your picture in the article and, pass it over.
Yeah, and it was good. I was able I attended Justin's ceremony. If there's a ceremony at a winery, it's hard to say.
Yeah, one.
Nobody invited me when Mel graduated, so I don't know where it was. Somehow I'm on the invitation list now, so I might not know anybody else who'll be attending, but actually, I was able to speak with Congressman Panetta's chief of staff, who was the person who really helped us so much with the grant to get the fire engine. He was present, so it was good. Anyway, they held a very nice recognition of the participants about 2 weeks ago.
How big is the co?
How big is the what?
How many people?
How many people?
16. And that is what Jeff's pointing out about being in these circumstances, in these intimate settings, and you never know who you're gonna be communicating with, having these conversations, thanking, or down the road, who's gonna come back in your life in one way or another in your work. So, yeah, it's a phenomenal program.
Don't burn any bridges, is that what you're saying?
I'm a sweetheart. I got, yeah, no, yeah, right, no, yeah.
That made me with it.
Well, I just want to say that both Justin and Mel were really appreciative of what you do for our district, and you're a great value to our team, and we're very fortunate to have you. So thank you, guys. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, wonderful. Thank you. All right, public comment. Members of public may address the board on any items of interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board, but not on the agenda today. In compliance with the Brown Act, the board cannot discuss or act on items not on the agenda. However, board members or district staff members may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed by the public. Any public comments? Any comments that are not on the agenda? Okay. Consent agenda, we have 2 items on the consent agenda. We have the minutes from May 20th, 2025, as well as we have a riparian agency agreement. Do any board members want to pull any of those items? Any public want to pull any of those 2 items? No? Okay. If not, I'll bring it back to board and I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that the board approve the consent agenda, item A, the minutes of the board meeting of May 20th, 2025, and the riparian agency agreement.
Do I have a second? Dr. Peterson.
Directors Logan,
Aye.
Peterson,
Yes.
Mortensen,
Alright.
Tyrone. Aye. And Cardonish.
Aye. Great, motion passes 5-0. All right, public hearing, resolution number 05-2025. It's the weed abatement. The board will conduct a public hearing, consider any protests or objections, and if appropriate, adopt resolution number 05-2025, declaring accumulations of weeds and debris to be a public nuisance and ordering abatement of same.
The board president took the words right out of my mouth. So this is our public hearing segment of the weed abatement program. The citizens can come in and protest any issues with regards to their lots being tagged for weed abatement. Just a little background, that we have about 16 lots, or parcels, I should say, that are still in non-compliance. I did see a couple of others. I was gonna try and get out today on the general manager's coaxing. That didn't happen with our academy in full bloom this week. But there were a couple of lots that were abated. So it could be down to around 14. And I believe we had a couple of letters that were sent in with regards to lots that were cut. With that said, I just recommend the board open it up for any objections and available for any questions.
If I open up any questions?
No questions here.
Okay, I'll open it up for public hearing. Any comments? Oh, please, if
This
you,
gentleman was before me. Oh,
he doesn't, yeah. If you don't mind stepping to the podium, please introducing yourself.
I'm not quite that fancy. Mike Januzzi, I live on Plum Orchard Lane, received one of your form letters.
Saw that.
It says that your guys come out the first week of May and start inspecting.
Correct.
I don't go out and start mowing my place till about the last week of May, because I want my place clean before you start selling fireworks to the kids. Is there any way you can give me a courtesy call before you come out? Cause I know you know when your boys are gonna be there.
We got no, it's me that I go out.
Good.
Yeah, so it's I go out and inspect about 2,700 lots every year. I couldn't possibly make a phone call on every one of those.
Oh, so I don't know what neighborhood you're gonna be in?
Well, yeah, I mean, when we go around, we actually look at the parcels. We only identify the parcels that are in non-compliance at that point. If you cut it after, or I should say before, the period where the contractor's gonna come out, you're fine.
Well, it says weeds and debris. I'd like to be pointed out exactly what you want.
Well,
Maybe you could come out even when it's not your,
if you want to give us a call, I can come out and verify that your property's clear.
yeah, that's what I'd like to
But
do.
yeah,
Stop
if
it so you know exactly what you want.
Yeah, if you want to give me a call,
Cause I usually go on my place. 2 times.
Yeah.
I've got a tractor
What-
service,
what's-
but I do
what's your-
mowing.
so you're not on the list to be cut.
This,
You were as of the fifth, but then he goes back out and.
I go back out and
So then-
reinspect, and then there's another list for cutting.
yeah, okay. But yeah, I'm up on the fire stuff. I was a volunteer at South Bay for 17 years, EMT.
Yep.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you for
Appreciate it.
complying.
Oh, no, I comply on the fire stuff.
You,
I hope the profits from those fireworks pay for that fire truck.
I wish I got the profits from.
You
didn't know that? Yeah, right.
We received 2 other letters, addressed, since the public hearing notice went out. One is from Catherine Hill and another is from Will Tucker. We verified that neither of the letters that were received have from property owners that have parcels that are still on the lack of abatement list, for lack of a better word. I do want to clarify, should have been quicker. So the district's ordinance says that the lots have to be in compliance with weed abatement standards on May 1st. So it is true that if people reach compliance at the end of April, they may have to maintain compliance longer. Their lot might have been compliant on May 1st, but by later on, weeds could continue to grow. So the district's ordinance requires compliance be achieved on May 1st, which is why we inspect following May 1st. And there's a process laid out in the health and safety code that notifies, that we have to notify these property owners about their status, give them an opportunity to protest the cutting. For example, a property owner might state that that's a crop that's being grown on that parcel, not weeds, and therefore it should be exempted, or they have livestock on the property that we might not have seen at that very moment, that's grazing, etc. So while we notified 146 or 7 folks in early May, 90% of them had fully abated or abated to our standard by last week. And so the only ones that remain are the ones that are listed on the exhibit to the resolution. So if you, after the conclusion of the public hearing, adopt this resolution, the only parcels that we will send the contractor to abate are listed on the exhibit. There are 16 of them. If the contractor arrives and it has been abated in the meantime, then they'll just move on.
What he actually writes, because we give him work orders, the contractor, and if he pulls up to a property and it's been abated after I've gone and inspected it the second time, and they've cut it in between that period, then our contractor will arrive on the property and just write OA owner abated, and then he moves on.
And then you said a couple of these properties have already, you think they may have been abated of these
Yes.
60?
Yeah, so before I actually give him the cut list, I'm gonna go out one more time and look and verify. I am working with Mr. Tucker, Will Tucker, on the Templeton West property. They have an easement through, and it's not part of the Templeton West, HOA. And I'm forgetting the name of the actual group. But
Blue Rock or something.
Blue Rock Development, yeah. They have the Bennett Road easement that goes through their property. They didn't
The county.
no, well, it's county, but on the other side, it's still their jurisdiction, so I'm gonna work with Mr. Tucker on that, identifying that section that needs to be cut.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and, if there are no other comments, I'm gonna close the public hearing, come back to the board. Any further questions or comments? Okay, not then I'll entertain a motion, for this item.
So I'll make a motion that the board approve resolution number 05-5 or 2025. A resolution declaring an accumulation of weeds and debris to be a public nuisance and authorizing abatement of those public nuisance.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Correct, it's everyone. Heard that first. Or corrected Logan and.
Directors Logan,
Aye.
Tyrone. Aye. Mortensen,
Aye.
Peterson,
Yes.
and Cardonish.
Aye. Okay. Next item is resolution number 06-2025, water supply buffer policy revision. Yeah.
Mouthful.
Yeah, good evening. Just by way of a little bit of background, before any folks that weren't here in February. We adopted a water supply buffer policy back in 2016. And that policy requires the district to update its model, which is essentially a forecast of water availability based on prior usage and demand for unconnected units compared to our supply each year. That was done most recently in February. In February, this past February, that model run recommended that one water unit be released to the wait list. At the time in February, the board voted and instructed us to release that water unit. It was released to the wait list and has since been assigned to one of the property owners on the wait list. Immediately after that decision, the board directed the Water and Wastewater Utilities Committee to examine the policy and determine if there were policy points or policy components or assumptions in the policy that were introducing overly conservative components or items that prevented additional water units from being released in 2025. Subsequent to that discussion, this item came up in one of your strategic planning workshops, in which case that point was reiterated. And there was some further clarification about how quickly the board wished to see this item revisited. Staff, myself, Justin Black, Lori Azim met in early May and reviewed the policy. And we internally kind of came up with 4 areas that we thought were worth discussing with the committee. In early May, the committee, the Water and Wastewater Utilities Committee met, and staff of the committee discussed those specific 4 points. And I'll highlight them just very briefly. We discussed, whether or not the concept of adjusting the 20% supply buffer was warranted, and discussed the short and long-term risks of that. We discussed the interpretation of one of the policy points related to the proven reliability of supply, and whether, as it relates to, say, the Nacimiento recharge recovery project, that project ought to be considered proven, even though it's not necessarily wet water or available water to us just yet. We discussed reducing the reservation of water of some or all of the units within the model, particularly the units that are assigned to 575 gallons, and how that might work, as well as its short and long-term risks. And then finally discussed the possibility of providing kind of a credit, that's not a technical term, a credit for the expected treated wastewater associated with the future connection of outstanding units. So I'm gonna pull up a couple of items to, I think, help explain this final point a little bit better, if you don't mind. I'm jumping ahead here, and we'll come back in a second, but this chart, most of you have seen it a few times now, and this is not, by the way, what's reflected in the chart has not been adopted. This is not your February update. This is a run of the model if you would adopt policy changes. But for the way the model works is this sort of purple bar is our forecast of water demand for all the existing connections. And it takes the prior 12 years worth of demand, and it subtracts the high year and the low year, and it models that forward. So it's kind of like a 10-year rolling average, a 10 data point rolling average forward. Then this gray box, it represents most of what we're calling in this report, outstanding units. And those include units that are associated with virtual meter agreements, quite a few of those. It includes units that are associated with payment plan agreements. Those are typically the units that have been released over the last several years that are they're not fully assigned to the parcel. They're committed to the parcel if the provisions in the payment plan are followed by the property owner, but they're not yet associated with like a virtual meter agreement. So they're kind of in process of being assigned to that particular parcel. And it includes what we've called zero use meters. We had some customers prior to a deadline at the end of 2018 either assign units that they had associated with their property to an existing meter if there was a meter on the site, or some folks installed a meter even though there's nothing on the property to serve. So we've called those zero use meters because the water use is not representative of the future demand. It's still kind of pending. And then this green bar, much smaller above, those represent water units. This is a much smaller figure that are subject to the water capacity fee. So these are units that date back a while and have been assigned on properties for, in some cases, decades, 3 decades or more. And when the deadline came to put them to use, most folks put them in, actually set a meter or entered into a virtual meter agreement, but some did nothing. And the water codes now states that those folks, if they didn't put them to use by the end of 2018, they're subject to a water capacity fee, which is essentially the difference between what they paid for the water unit, the impact fee at the time, could have been $2,400, and whatever it is the time they go to put it in use. So some of them are going to be subject to like $40,000 or more fee in today's dollars. So together, those are outstanding units, and they actually represent a pretty significant portion of our future water demand. You can see here, it's like something like 15 or 20% on top of what our current customers are projected to use. So that, those units, the way this, the committee, examined those four options, and at the conclusion of the discussion, based on the alternatives that staff developed and our discussion of short and long-term risks, recommended, provided staff supported this, that there be a revision to the policy to provide this credit for future wastewater flows. Now, the model, the water buffer model, again, don't look at the specific numbers, but for existing demand, those wastewater flows are already reflected in that supply, because if your house is on the district's water system and you're connected to wastewater, the water that flows to the wastewater plant is treated and then percolated at the Selby site, becomes a future water supply. And for all the existing customers, that is shown in this 2,000, is part of what makes up this 2,135 acre feet predicted supply. However, the model wasn't, while it's prepared to respond to future connections and pick up future connections once that wastewater flowed, it wasn't necessarily making assumptions about how much water would come back for treated wastewater as a water supply. So the policy revision, and it's been kind of spelled out in this revised policy document. Again, this use, the way the policy reads right now is the amount of water reserved for outstanding units shall is calculated using their assigned value. The policy, the proposed revision would add to that, and it would add this credit concept. And the credit concept is this: we know that about 77% of today's water connections are also connected to the wastewater system. So it would take that into consideration. We know, based on a 2018 study, that the average a equivalent dwelling unit produces 176 gallons of wastewater. And that could be updated if newer information is available. And then we know that we get credit. It's about, let me choose another word since I'm using it twice. We're able to retrieve 98% of the water we discharge at Selby. It's assumed that 2%, that loss, is picked up by riparian vegetation that exists along the riverbank, or along the river. And so there's a little bit of a loss of water. So we applied those factors together. The 176 gallons times the 98% times the 77%. And we arrived at a credit of 133 gallons. So if you take that in a global way, because not everybody's going to connect, so for us to average this out to the wastewater system, it creates a reduction in the reservation of water to account for the global increase in supply once these connections take place. And so we've drafted that language to read what you see under the second bullet point. The amount of water reserved for outstanding units shall be calculated by using the allocation of water assigned to the respective unit, 300, 430, 500 gallons per day, applicable at the time the water unit was assigned to the parcel. That's the existing policy. And then we add less the expected increase in water supply available due to treated wastewater once connected. To calculate the expected increase, the estimate of wastewater created per EDU, which is currently 176 gallons, is multiplied times the amount of supply that can be retrieved relative to the amount of percolated treated wastewater, which is 98%, together, which is together multiplied by the percentage of water connections that are served by the wastewater system, which is currently 77%. So as of now, this figure is the 133 gallons. The assumptions used for EDU, gallons per day, retrieval percentage of treated wastewater, and ratio of wastewater connections to water connections will be updated as new information is available. If the board were to adopt the resolution to adopt this updated policy, the model has been reran. That's the one I was showing you just a moment ago. And it forecasts that in addition that 124 acre feet is available because the reservation of water for those outstanding units shrinks by 133 gallons each. And if we apply that same math to newly released units, the model suggests you can release 249 additional units now if the policy is updated. Now, I do wanna, I think it's worth discussing this. This is a shift in the policy. I think my biggest concern heading into this was to be cautious about introducing new long-term risks to the district's water supply portfolio and our ability to serve our customers, again, long-term. And because we're making efforts to relocate our Nacimiento water from the Selby site to the Creekside site, the Nacimiento Recharge and Recovery Project, provided you do that, this introduces very little long-term risks, because our plan all along was to continue to percolate water at that site, and we should be able to create sufficient capacity by relocating that project. There's virtually no short-term risk, because if you release units today, we know it takes quite a while before any of these units are ever gonna connect, and they won't connect in mass tomorrow. And essentially, this is sort of a as units are connected, the reservation of water goes away and the actual demand is used. So it's sort of a self-correcting model. The model is sort of self-correcting. I think this, and I believe the committee felt like this was a low-risk way of removing some conservative elements from the policy. So that's what's in front of you now. I mean, myself, Lori, Azim, and Just a Black Girl here, we're happy to kind of address any questions that you might have. But we've brought this item forward in a manner that would allow you to adopt the resolution, adopt an updated policy, and release units, all right now, if you wish. And then, of course, the two, Eric Mortensen, Director Mortensen and Director Peterson, were present at that committee meeting and had some time discussing this.
Great, thank you for the report, appreciate it. Let's start with questions from the board. Do you guys have any questions for the general manager?
So I have a question. So, I like that you came up with option 4, because I think that was, an assumption that was not previously built into the water buffer, model. And primarily because when we came up with the model, we didn't have, the east side, the wastewater from the east side. It was going to Paso. So it makes sense to, adjust the policy now and to take that into consideration. But you raised an interesting point about, the percolation at Selby and moving that to Creekside. So what's the time frame for Creekside? Because I'm assuming the 124 units that we release, I think that's the number that we're looking at. So
240.
249. So, so if we release the 249, that's not going to occur. I mean, likely they're not going to be hooked up for a couple of years, if there's new development, assuming. So what's the timing of Creekside?
So our current forecast is to have that in place by 2029. 2029.
Construction.
Yeah,
In operational 2028?
Probably, yeah, more end of 2028 into 2029.
And these units will not be developed for probably 10 to 15 years. Right?
It's-
Because there's just, that we haven't sold them yet, so by the time they go through. the
But yeah, by
process-
the time that, because it's gonna run in parallel, and I think they'll probably marry up at the same time. That's what I'm kind of looking.
I mean, I think it does, I think if you're having second thoughts about, if you had any second thoughts about proceeding with the Nazi Recharge and Recovery Project, then I would be much more cautious about this plan. But we're already beginning the design work for the relocated turnout.
Yeah.
You discussed earlier tonight the budget for the remaining components to be designed, because we have been approved. but it's been there's been funding allocated over the past couple of years for it. There'll be other steps that'll come before you on that project, the design is all we're dealing with now, and then once it's time to construct, there'll be a funding opportunity or a question before you about funding the construction, and you'll have a better sense of how many units connect. I can tell you this, that in a sort of, really, since 2021, we've released about 200 units since 2021. Rough numbers. With one very strange exception, only one unit has been put to use since then, of those newly released units. Now, that's not totally true, because there was some strange things that happened at the Cambria Hotel. That project was approved based on some units that were already assigned to that project. And then at the kind of last minute, the developer wanted to utilize the newer units and essentially using a lot line adjustment, move the older units. So technically speaking, those are newer units that are served at the Cambria Hotel. But not because only because of that strange phenomenon that taken place. So there is a lag in terms of how fast these will be used. I don't know how. I mean, somebody who's aggressive might be able to put them to use, within a few years if their project didn't require complex entitlements. I think we're in a kind of, unfortunately, in kind of a lull development wise now for like 5 years, where other than the Cambria Hotel, there's been almost no housing other than ADUs at all. And very little other development taking place now for quite an extended period of time, even though we have a lot of water units assigned to parcels in Templeton. We're not preventing, the water situation isn't preventing all those parcels that have outstanding units from proceeding. They can do so. They're not necessarily waiting on, they're not necessarily on the wait list. Some are for different reasons, but they have water assigned to them, all of the parcels that are associated with those outstanding units. So it's really hard to say how fast they'll come. I wouldn't suggest that we can just sit on our hands on the Nasi project and wait until we run out of supply to move forward, because it's going to take a little bit of time. But you'll have better information as time goes on.
Yeah, I mean, the board has decided previously that that's a top priority.
Yeah,
so
that's where we're headed. So I think we're in agreement on heading that way. And so it's not contingent upon completion of that project. It's just saying that that project gives us greater capacity. So we can still release the 224 units or 249 water units now. We have that capacity.
If you adopt the policy, the resolution, it would adjust the policy.
Yeah.
And suggest that you could release those units. Now, again, because the way this model is, the policy change really just reduces the reservation of water.
Yeah.
For these outstanding units. It's not predicting necessarily a growth in supply. But that will come as they connect. So I think it handles it in sort of a different way. It's not on the supply side, it's on the reservation of water side to account for that. Essentially, if a customer parcel has a connection and they're connected to the wastewater system, we're assuming that they're going to provide a little bit of their own supply back through the wastewater system. That's kind of how this is working. That's what's happening everywhere else in Templeton right now. We do have, but I don't want you to think that we don't have constraints. I mean, the Selby site is a constrained site. Moving that Nasi mineral water off there will increase the capacity substantially to make this possible. But there will continue to be challenges at the Selby site, and we need to continue to perform maintenance. We need to improve the percolation at the pond so that decades from now it still works well.
But it's not contingent upon making the move to Selby. It's not contingent upon releasing the 249. So, I mean,
The
I
policy is
should
not.
say, moving it to Creekside, it's not contingent upon that.
Yeah, the
We
policy.
have the capacity now to release the 249. But long-term, we do have to go to Creekside.
Yeah, I mean, in order to
Percolate.
ensure that you have the capacity, you've gotta be committed to moving the.
Yeah,
the
and I think we
acceptance
are.
of marijuana.
Yeah.
Well, I
So-
think there's two approaches that would, and basically improve our ability to take wastewater at Selby. One would be moving the Nacimiento water and also improving infiltration at Selby with some different projects that are probably be
Yeah.
that are being considered with the master plan.
Yeah.
So there might be kind of two different things we do. We move the Nacimiento water or most of it. And then we also improve it so we can, it infiltrates more quickly so we can discharge more. Or make one of the ponds larger so that it has more room. So there could be kind of different things we do to improve Selby so we can increase the amount of.
I guess I would put it this way. We're taking, since we brought since 2020. Or 2021, let me rephrase. Since 2021, all the wastewater that's been disposed of has been disposed of Selby, aside from what's evaporated. We've not used the spray fields to dispose of wastewater. So we're confident we can handle today's wastewater volumes. It's still, it's managing it. It's not easy. There are times when we can't discharge the Selby for various reasons, typically high groundwater. And we've averaged about 100 acre feet of Nacimiento water that we've sent to Selby as well. So if we remove the Nacimiento water, we should be able to percolate an additional 100 acre feet or so of treated wastewater, provided it's treated to a pretty high standard. So that's under the current circumstances. And now the wastewater doesn't perk quite as well as the Nacimiento water because it's got it's got a higher level of suspended solids and some other things, but the math kind of works. We know in the long term, we've got to move the placing the Nacimiento water at Selby when we did, a couple decades ago was kind of only a short-term solution. I mean, we need that capacity for wastewater in the long term. So it has to be moved sooner or later.
Which,
It has really little to do with this change because unless you're gonna start using the spray field, we don't have another place to
Yeah.
put it.
I'm comfortable.
Any other questions? Okay, go ahead to public. Go ahead.
I just have a question about, our supply of water, because you said one of the new wells that had arsenic in it. Do we know what's causing the arsenic and, will the percolation increase or decrease the amount of arsenic in the water? I don't know if it's arsenic's like, a big rock or something that's dissolving.
So we actually have a number of wells that have arsenic in it. It's a naturally occurring in groundwater supplies. But arsenic is not a problem for the district unless it exceeds the maximum contaminant level. And we have a couple of wells that we rely on that do. And so having treatment or blending sources to ensure that we don't deliver water that exceeds that level is what's critical for us. So that well that we talked about earlier, that's what we call the Platts Deep well. It's been an arsenic concern for a while, but its level of arsenic that was tested was just below the threshold, so we can continue to utilize it. And after we did this rehabilitation project, it now exceeds the threshold. For probably many reasons, but we altered the way the well operates by doing this rehabilitation, and perhaps it's getting more water from some specific locations underground that have higher levels of arsenic.
So you don't think it's the percolation that's actually causing the arsenic to?
We're percolating, the Selby site is south of the high school, and the wells that have arsenic trouble are miles away from that. And they're actually in the wells that we have that are on the arsenic watch list, and that's my term, not a very technical one.
Our watch.
They're coming from a much deeper aquifer, and in Templeton, I'm no expert in this, but from my understanding is that for much of Templeton and in the river area, there's a clay layer that sits like 60 to 100 feet below the surface. And there's very little influence between the water that's in that what I'll call the Salinas River aquifer and the deeper aquifer, the Paso Robles formation. And that's where the arsenic is typically found. We don't have high levels of arsenic in the Salinas River aquifer, and that's where our percolated water is going.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. I'll bring it back to board for discussion. Any comments? No.
I support the release of the 249 water units and the revision to the policy, so I'm good.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I feel the same as you mentioned. We couldn't do this, 5 or 6 years ago before the project. So we ended up, that we brought all the water, the effluent water back from Paso Robles. And that was one of the main reasons we did it, to bring the affluent water back to Templeton. And, I think at the time, our staff, our previous district engineer, Tina Mayer, she worked really hard to get all the easements and deal with the contractors and all that, all the hard work that she did. And thanks to Justin and his crew right now for percolating every gallon of wastewater that's coming through. I mean, that's huge. That wasn't happening before. So I think the ponds are in much better condition, and it's working. And so we spend a lot of money, and I think we should take advantage of what we did. We used to pay $250,000 to Paso Robles
To
to treat our water.
and we never got it back. They percolated it and used it.
Yes, so now it's our turn. So, and we are, one of our jobs is we are a water district, and I think it's our responsibility to look at our policies and responsibly, because water obviously is a limited resource, responsibly release water units, because it's one of our jobs, and that's, it helps the residents, Templeton residents, that's, it's just real quick, I want to share a story. Is when we first moved here, when I sold my dental practice, over there, we had, I had done the building and did the renovation for, did a dental office. And then, so I thought when we sell my practice over there, I could come over here and do the same thing, in a small town. So the first property I go to, it was just dirt. And then, it was a good location, and I was interested. And then, they said, well, you can't build here for a while. I'm all, why? Because there's no water to it. I'm all, excuse me, water? Okay, no problem. I'll go get water, but no, you gotta go on a wait list for 20-25 years. I'm all, what? So then I found another building that was already built, and then it was on a second story, and went to, okay, I want to, renovate it, put a new dental office in, and they go, you can't do that. You gotta put bathrooms in, and this is not, there's not enough water for having a bathroom in this building. So, because of it, I couldn't build start a dental office, and it makes me think how many other situations like that has happened. So, all those people that are on the wait list, they have dreams, either a business or a home or, investment. So I think it's a responsibility to look at these policies carefully. And if we can release water units, I think we should.
Yeah, and I think you're right, though. I think the district has looked at how it needed to evolve to accommodate some of the development growth. And, we had Tina, who was part of the previous legacy, and now Lori will also carry on that legacy with Creekside and some of the other development that we're looking at for water capacity to take us into the future. So, and I think that's a responsible thing to do. And we've made great strides. Cause I remember the first year we issued water units. We were all like, what, we're issuing water units? It hasn't been done in 20 years. So.
No, that's why we purchased the Creekside property. Remember dealing with all the kittens?
My super well up.
But I think it just goes to show that we do have a customer base that is dependent upon the district to provide water. And so we need to continue to look at what do we need to go forward. And it certainly will help the development in the community, so.
Yeah, I think I'm excited. This is, it's huge. Thanks to you guys, thanks to everyone here that I mean, to be able to release 200, almost 250 units for Templeton, that's
Yeah.
just,
Yeah,
that's a
we have the largest release.
It is.
I have
the
talked to
largest-
Jeff, there will be a, kind of admin support to that, so
It's a
I
lot of
don't worry,
work.
it's not helping.
we're trying to be creative.
Questions?
We're trying to be creative about how to spread out the work. If this happens, then,
And-
spread out the work.
Well, and I think if you have to do it in phases, I think that's fine too. I mean, eventually, ideally, where we need to be is where we don't have the water wait list.
yes.
That's.
That
our
is, that
ultimate
would be
goal.
excellent, because
Yeah.
these releases and these allocations are taking quite a bit of time with all of the.
Yeah. Well, and I think
agreements,
it's also,
But it's also helping people out, because they have, 5 years to pay
Yeah.
for the unit, which they wanted 19, 20
Yeah.
years ago, so.
And, it would be nice to not have the wait list, hopefully eventually, is because right now we're asking people to pay for these water units before they even know what they're building, what the project's gonna be, and it's kind of, and, it's just the situation that we're in. Unfortunately, that was a decision that, previous boards have made, and, I think it's something that we gotta try to change, and so hopefully people just come up to the office and say, hey, we want a water unit, and they have the water unit, they know exactly what to build. There'll be a lot less questions, and I think it will eventually free up your time, so, and plus, all that hopefully will help with CFD funds and property taxes, so. But, great. Yeah, if there are no other questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion for this, resolution.
so I'll make a motion that the board approve resolution 06-2025, the water supply buffer policy revisions. Revising the water buffer policy and authorizing the release of 249 water units.
Do I have a second? Okay, great. Roll call, please.
Director Logan,
Aye.
Mortensen,
Aye.
Peterson, Petron, and Fredonich.
Aye. Alright, good job, you guys, appreciate it, thanks. Okay, right, next item is continuation of our budget workshop. We were just finishing up the fire department.
We'll just, I'll try to jump back in where we were. We weren't quite done. I think I had summarized the board's direction as it relates to possible consideration of a change to the strategic plan and policies, and how much, how the CFD transfer in would look with the goal of bringing forward a budget that is, has a balance of 0, but no excess revenues from the CFD revenue, from the CFD fund. I did want to point out a couple of items, that I had notes on that we hadn't quite got to yet. There's a one-time, request, that's programmed for, an elk ear shut-off nozzle, and it's pretty minor, it's about $2,100 for that item.
That's actually Elkhart.
Oh, Heart, should be Heart.
It is.
It is Heart. It's just I didn't pick up the T.
I got an R on mine.
You got an R, I'm missing a T.
Here.
On the budget, it's fun.
Yeah, good, okay, it's right somewhere, I screwed up.
They're the line items that they'll cover.
Oh, perfect.
What is it, Elkhart?
Elkhart is just a brand of brass
Oh,
fittings, valves.
it kind of goes on.
It goes on the actual 2.5 and 8.75 fittings on the fire engine.
Okay.
So they're more stout valves. That what we're having an issue with is the plastic valve handles, especially on the Type 3 engines, they're breaking. They sit out in the UV and the sun, just become brittle.
So that's that item. I did want to note that it was requested to purchase a replacement utility vehicle. We have the pickup truck, the red pickup truck that we have that's been in that capacity for about 3 years now. Utility capacity, but the truck is a 2011. It does have some unknown transmission troubles that was requested to be funded, but is not by the fire chief. It is not included in the budget because we were so tight. But that, I just wanted to make note of that there was a request for it. And that is a little, we have a requirement that doesn't have a deadline to actually utilize. We had a grant to upgrade a truck that we had that had a breathing, it was known as the breathing support, had an air compressor that filled bottles at a seat. And it was a regional, benefit vehicle. It didn't serve Templeton a whole heck of a lot, but served the region. And we got a grant to upgrade that vehicle, to, get a compliant compressor in there that, you know, had sensors that wouldn't put emissions into the air, et cetera. But that compressor, so we funded that, this is like 8 years ago now, or somewhere along those lines when that work was done. We never could get it to run well and, operate properly. I don't think it was ever really placed back into service for any extent of time. And we were not able to take advantage of it. Our staffing model wasn't able to really support that vehicle. We didn't have enough people on duty at a time to devote 2 people to respond with that vehicle to another, agency if they had a fire, without depleting our resources to the point where we couldn't respond to something here. So for those reasons, we requested to get out of the grant obligation and then sell the vehicle, which we ultimately did. And we were able to do so provided we eventually used the proceeds from the sale of that vehicle to purchase a 3/4 ton truck. There's no deadline with that requirement, but it does stand.
Just to add a little bit more, I did offer that vehicle that the general manager was talking about to other departments. This particularly in the North County, and there were no takers on that to continue that grant and try and get some revenue from it, but it just there were no takers, because the system just didn't work.
Anyways, we've already talked about sort of the bottom line for the fire fund, and you can expect some basically based on the direction provided at the conclusion of our workshop earlier. You can expect these figures to change and the next fund is the CFD fund. So we've already kind of talked about this in terms of it's a fairly flat revenue forecast. Over the last few years, and going into next year, there are some minor expenses associated with creating the assessments each year and some, a little bit of the admin allocation. Of course, that's gonna change probably by a few bucks. And so the forecast is that the CFD would net just over $82,000. I'm sorry, just over $82,000 available. And based on your prior discussion, rather than this being transferred to the fire operating fund, the full amount would be transferred into the future fire operations. It's still part of the fire fund. It's just a subset of the fire fund. And then a smaller amount would go from that future fire operations to the fire operating fund to close the expected deficit.
Jeff, I have a clarification question. When you mentioned that the board had decided to direct these funds to the fire for a certain amount of years, how many years and what commitment was that?
I believe the strategic financial policy says through 2029, 2030.
Okay.
So the next fund is the streetlights fund. This fund does 2 things. It funds using property taxes, general streetlights. Those are streetlights in Templeton, including on Green Street and in a few other locations where we have general streetlights. And then it also manages 4 lighting districts. We have 4 neighborhoods, if you will, that have lighting assessment districts where those property owners are assessed the cost of paying for the lighting within the neighborhood. And those are the four separate ones that you see here. Altogether, the fund does operate at a small deficit, about 20, you can see here this year, it's forecast to be $2,500, 25, 22. We've talked before about the eventual likely need to shift some additional property to grow that, property tax allocation. Right now, I believe it receives 1.75, just under 2%, of property taxes, and that may need to grow just a smidge. But you have several years before you have to make that decision. We have a balance of, an available balance of streetlight fund, and you can sort of spend that down before you have to make that determination. So even though it's operating at a deficit, there's cash available to support that deficit. But probably within some years, that'll be, it's not a very significant one, but it is. And then, last but certainly not least, we have the Parks and Recreation Fund. Only last because it's Fund 30. And so just a few items, there's a little bit more the revenues are broken out by sort of general items, including like, property taxes and whatnot, but there's also program income associated with the what I'll call our flagship programs, our bigger programs such as concerts. So concerts of the park revenue has its own line item, soccer, basketball, softball, flag football, and then other smaller programs fall into this miscellaneous programs category. That would be things like skate camp, scoot camp, etc. You'll also see a significant revenue source being the franchise fees. That's the 10% solid waste franchise fee that we receive as a part of the franchise agreement that is now with Waste Management. So all of our traditionally offered programs are expected to occur or funded to occur in the draft budget with pretty steady participation. So you see the revenues are similar to prior years, up a little bit or down a little bit. Our participation numbers can fluctuate based on like the size of the age groups. You know, while like the soccer program serves kids who are like 4 to 18, the majority are in kind of this elementary school age group, and so those groups can fluctuate in size. Fundraising revenue as a separate, that's something we started last year, a separate line item. This forecast of $13,000 for fundraising income includes like the beer run and maybe some drive-through barbecues, but does not include a big Live in the Dream program. The program that was held this past year, you know, it wasn't a huge revenue generator. It wasn't a huge net revenue generator to TCSD. And I don't think we have a commitment from TRF to host it again.
No, they've not committed yet,
So
and I don't know that they will.
So is this fundraising income just what you're doing, Mel?
Well, it's other events with TRF, like the beer run.
Is there a TRF?
What's that?
Is there really a TRF? Are there people left on that
Yes,
board?
yes, yeah.
Okay.
They're rebuilding, actually. There's been two new members added in the last couple months, so.
And do they have programs already outlined for fundraising purposes?
Primarily the beer run, and they have a scholarship fund that's been set up through a donation in perpetuity, through a bequeathment.
But anything specific for Park and Rec?
No, well, the scholarship fund comes directly to us, yeah.
Okay.
the scholarship funds though don't land in this category because the scholarships are for youth participants who otherwise may not be able to participate. So the
Federal program.
yeah, it would go, like if a recipient of a scholarship was enrolling in soccer,
Yeah.
it would show up in soccer revenue.
So this fundraising income is just any drive-through that you're doing and anything that TRF might provide to
Hopefully.
Park and Rec?
Beer run
Yeah.
and a drive-through barbecue.
Directly barbecues, yeah.
Okay. But we haven't
Any
gotten
other
it,
thing
but
I
we
can-
don't have a commitment from TRF though.
Not for living the dream.
Well, do we have any commitment from TRF in terms of what we're going to receive from them for next?
They
fiscal
don't,
year?
not a specific dollar amount, no, but just, 50% of the proceeds that go
Yeah.
from the beer run, for example.
And that covers this 13,000?
You think that, well, last
That
year
and
was,
other events will, yes, other, like the drive-through,
Okay.
dinner fundraisers will.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
I just wanna make sure that we're putting in something, because I don't trust TRF since they're independent of the district. I want either, if we don't have commitment from TRF, I'm not gonna.
I'm pretty sure about the beer run because Jeff
Yeah.
English is running it, helps out with that.
Certain
He's-
about
yeah.
Well, and that's kind of a given that it happens, and I know
Yeah, and last year.
Mel,
we
it
got
happened because
six-
of you
We
too.
just had 250 runners on Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
so-
only
It's not-
TRF event that's in that amount is the beer.
Is the beer run. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah, so, and then you guys,
okay. Thank you.
Okay, on the expenditure side, I want to just call it a couple things. And again, this looks like a longer list, and that's because we break down line items by youth sport. And so you'll see like official soccer, officials basketball, official softballs, and you see the same thing for FICA and SUI. Those are employee costs, salary costs for part-time employees for each of those activities. So it looks like it's much longer, and it's just a way of accounting for it, so we can run reports of costs by program. Couple of items, the PERS retirement cost is up pretty considerably. You see that about $14,000. That's really all tied to an increase in the tier 1 miscellaneous UAL. I mentioned that under the admin fund as well. The recycling grant program, that was something that was, it's kind of a carryover from the solid waste fund days of several years ago. And when we merged those funds, initially that grant was funded each year. About a year and a half ago, there was an ad hoc committee that recommended that not be programmed each year and considered only after it was determined that there was funds available. This past year, that the 24-25 budget didn't begin with the recycling grant, and then in mid-year funding was added for it. So it's starting out unfunded again, and you could consider adding it later if you wish.
I mean, about that, I don't know if I wanna add it to it, I would just rather just leave it as is. Because IWMA does offer grants to small businesses and, so they could just directly apply to IWMA and, that way we could save our funds for our program. I mean, that's at least my feeling right now.
And then I had noted on here that the admin, this is another fund that grew relative to, in 2023-24 relative to other funds. And so its admin allocation is up about $20,000. And those numbers are all gonna change based, if you adopt a policy revision, probably another $6,000 or $7,000, that'd be my guess, without rewriting the math. So the bottom line right now is the fund, the end of the year, even when you consider the one-time, I'm sorry, there's some one-time costs that I wanted to note on here that I wanted to go through. $8,000 is programmed for tree trimming at German Park. That's something that we identified last fall or something that's necessary. We have one computer that's in the same situation where it won't support the next version of Windows. That's programmed at $1,500. $5,000 is requested to replace our manual paint sprayer. We have a paint sprayer. It's a walk behind manual gas powered unit that is used for field marking. And there's two issues. There's locations on, even if the robot is working perfectly, there are places on the field that the robot won't mark. For example, it cannot mark a line all the way up to a goalpost. I don't know how close it gets.
It's
Few
inches
feet.
away. Yeah,
Huh?
it's about 6 inches away, which is significant. Yeah, so, from either side of the goalpost, so it's a good foot, that is not marked.
The robot won't get close to the goal, won't get too close to the goalpost. There are locations where we cannot get a solid satellite signal and the robot doesn't function along it's on the west side of German Park.
Yeah,
There's a tree canopy
there's a
that
tree canopy that
blocks
blocks
the robot from getting an adequate satellite signal, and so sometimes it has to be done by hand.
Well, we're trimming trees,
And then we have occasionally trouble, if we have technical difficulties and don't have time to get them resolved with the support
Yeah.
system, we have to, we're not gonna cancel soccer games, we've gotta manually chalk or stripe the fields. So this is this is recommended to replace it. We have a mower, that we have one riding lawn mower, that is about 8 years old. That has some, needs some repairs, and the repairs are significant enough that it may not make sense to make them all that over. But I think what I recall is about $8,000, $6,000 or $8,000 for repairs
So, yeah, it's around there.
that are recommended for it, and just may not make sense for us to sink that kind of money into an aging, not old, but aging mower.
Didn't we get a mower a couple of years ago?
Tractor.
We got a
Thank you
tractor
very much.
a year and a half
Yeah.
ago.
Oh, dude, I thought we
That
got
was just-
something that you were gonna be able to hook up the mower.
That's a weed mower.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, that was,
For doing areas like, Creekside.
Weed
Large acreage.
Big flail mower.
the smaller parks mode.
So this is just a riding lawnmower?
Well, right, for municipal parks. for
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's bigger than like what,
Okay.
you would have at your house, right?
Yeah, I don't know, what's the mowing deck on, 5 feet or something?
5
Yeah.
feet.
Yeah,
That's
and,
6 inches.
and staff went and got some, quotes when they were putting these figures together, and this was a lesser cost John Deere unit versus the Kubota. By, $10,000, this is a lesser cost piece of equipment, but would still do this, a good job. Would still do the job for us.
And keep in mind, I know that our existing mower isn't that old, but our, couple of things have happened. We've had a lot of turnover in the parks maintenance position, and so it's not an excuse, because it's my responsibility, but I'm not sure the equipment's always been handled with sufficient care. And then two, we have very rough field conditions, and when you see that mower going by, it's taking a beating, it's boom, 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 boom. And that is hard on all the mechanical equipment.
But they're getting better, right?
Yeah, we're hoping that we get the longevity out of this, if we were able to purchase this mower, we would get that longevity out of the the equipment because of the improved field conditions and the maintenance programs associated with taking care of the piece of equipment, so with both of those.
And then this budget includes the additional staff from last year that we
Yes.
got, so.
It's got-
For park maintenance and everything. Okay,
Yeah, it maintains the same level of,
Cedar Park, okay.
yeah, and we've actually just got the second full-time position filled less than a month ago, or about a month ago. So we just now have 2 full-time employees
Oh, really?
working in parks.
In a full-time capacity, we had a part-time
Yeah,
person.
did he just,
Yeah.
oh, okay,
So the full-time person just
Just started.
about a month ago.
his name is
Henry.
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 The new person.
There's another utility person that also starting with it.
Requested but not programmed, I wanted to mention, was a UTV with a dump bed. To, I think, replace the current use of the golf cart that was purchased primarily to haul persons out on game days and practice days that are mobility challenged. That golf cart gets used during the week for moving light equipment around particularly Evers Park, and it's kind of taken a beating, and it was requested to fund a UTV. I don't recall the amount of that. It was something like $20,000 or $25,000. Yeah. So that was not included. That's not listed in the budget. I did want to know that was requested. So bottom line on the Parks and Recreation Fund is, if you include the program one-time expenses, we're about $8,500 to the good. That number is going to change if you adopt a revised policy on the admin allocation that removes the Saver grant carve out that you talked about earlier. And it's gonna become a number that's like $1,000 to the good. I don't know the bottom, I mean, math, but it's gonna be something like that.
So this already also includes the parks restroom renovation.
Yes, and I'm sorry, I probably skipped over that too.
We're doing some big items.
You are, the parks restroom renovation, and I want you to consider that kind of as a placeholder figure because we're recommending doing some ADA evaluation of those before we actually program that work. So that we're not improving we're not doing a lot of extensive work that is out of ADA compliance. So once we have that.
Well, and that's smart, because some of the complaints were that they were not ADA compliant. Because I remember Jeff English had a neighbor or a friend who, was relying upon ADA compliance.
Yeah, we
in
made
the
some,
restroom.
he had some
Had
pretty,
some
that particular resident actually came out to the park and met with staff and we made some pretty simple adjustments that kind of solved their observations. This is more like, does it make sense to replace like the partitions if in fact the current partitions are not compliant and the doorway's too narrow? Or we don't have the toilets in the wrong spot or something like that. So it didn't make sense for us it didn't make sense that we spend a lot of money on the restroom to get it to look nice if it was not compliant. But we don't have somebody on staff who's fully qualified to make that assessment. So we need to perform the assessment and then determine where we need to go from there. So it's gonna be both a aesthetic upgrade and a compliance upgrade at both park facilities. And then the ongoing stuff, which is the box that I would call your attention to, I think it's much more important to look at the big picture ongoing revenues versus ongoing expenditures. This is it shows a negative 18,000 or a negative, it's a surplus of 18,000. Again, that's gonna be something more, maybe more like 11, once we re-crunch the numbers on this. So we are, we moved over we merged the solid waste and fund into Parks and Recreation, but because we've programmed more money for maintenance and we've had some other costs go up and a lot of the revenue sources are pretty flat. That surplus that we had a few years ago is diminished.
Well, we have to do renovation on our parks and something. That was one thing, those were things that we hadn't done, so I think we just have to do it. We just gotta keep going. That's good.
But you're right, that number is gonna actually increase because if we reallocate the admin cost.
Then it's gonna, well,
Well, 'cause
18,000.
we're gonna be adding the admin, because we're gonna be taking some out of fire and spreading it across all.
And then, as I said, we'll have the option of not doing the grant, so that we did last year, that was $10,000, so. That was.
Yeah, it's not included in there now, so
Yeah, so we should be.
Excuse me, I didn't know, is there any income from the concert in the park or the farmer's market?
So a farmer's market, no, it's not a TCSD RAM program, but Concert of the Park, yes, that's we received the current budget forecast about $55,000 in revenue. That's not net revenue, that's gross revenue, the sponsorships and things of that nature. We have expenditures, we pay to rent the park, we pay the bands, we pay the sound company, we pay security, et cetera, et cetera. But it still nets, it's a positive cash flow program.
That's the county's park.
Oh,
That's not
okay.
ours.
Oh, got it.
But yeah,
A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah,
I
got-
think
3 calls today.
you would assume it's ours, but it's not.
They'll give it to us.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
No additional revenue.
She's living the dream.
Yeah, exactly. They would be happy to offer it.
Any questions on the budget for the parks?
Funded mandate.
Exactly.
Alright. Okay, so that is done.
yeah, I think we got
This discussion, so we're good. So you guys have all your direction?
we'll get busy.
Alright, good. General manager's report.
I sent you an update over on Saturday, I think, only I wanted to a couple of items that I wanted to. One, I'll be out of the office Thursday and Friday this week to attend a memorial service. And I did attend, it wasn't scheduled as of last week, but it got scheduled early this week. I did attend a meeting at IWMA to pursue jointly with Waste Management, their grant program to fund some public use containers on Main Street. And just so it's worth noting, that program does have a 1-to-1 cost match, so we have to figure that out. Like, it's not 100% funded. It's got a matching requirement, although we can use like some in-kind labor and stuff like that to help support the match. So that might be an item that would come out of Parks Recreation Solid Waste to fund those, to fund the matching half.
Okay, Waste Management to sponsor.
That's all I
Anything
have.
else? Okay, any questions for the general manager? Committee reports, Water and Wastewater Utilities Committee, any questions on that? Public, any questions? Okay, TAG, any questions? On TAG?
No, just thank
Any
you, Chelsea, for
comments?
attending on my behalf.
Oh, that was Chelsea. You really like me.
No, it's the one, it's only been twice. I've been there. I'm very happy being an alternate.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Finance Committee,
I don't care.
any, no questions, okay. And we have, I guess the report will be,
On the next one.
for the Parks and Rec. That was,
Yeah.
yeah, we had that just
Friday.
Friday, yeah, okay. Director's report and or comments, any director's report comments? No, okay. Public, oh, because we're going to public, okay. We're gonna have a closed session right after this. Any public comment on the closed session before we adjourn? Oh, okay, we're gonna go ahead and adjourn to closed session.